Well, hello and welcome to Better Than Fine. This is going to be another solo-sode. We're still getting settled in to this whole COVID-19 change thing. And I'm hoping next week to get some of the guests that I had scheduled to come on back on once they feel adapted to their new realities. I know I'm still adapting to my new reality. And today's episode, we're going to talk a bit about reframing, about how do you rewrap your mind around something when it's not going the way that you'd planned, or your concept of what was happening you realize isn't helpful, it's not adapting well, and how you go through this process of reframing, of re-ideating for yourself. And most of the time, it's a skill that I do with clients. It's pretty common with coaching. But it came up yesterday. The idea for this episode came up yesterday while I was talking to my cousin. Because God bless her. I'm really proud of how she's handling this whole situation for herself. We were talking about what her plans were for Friday night. And she was a person that would go out. She lives in a lively city and go bar hopping, try to meet a guy, have a good time. And she can't because everything's closed down. And so she planned with her friends to stream a movie together over FaceTime so they could watch it together but apart. And I think that's something that a lot of people are playing with, how to make that work. And what we talked about was that what she did was reframe the concept of what Friday night means. And so this episode is based off of that conversation, because some of what we shared with one another, then she thought like, oh, you need to do a podcast about this. And I said, thanks. And what I said was that Friday night in itself is a construct. And if you've never heard that term before, a construct is something that only exists in your mind. So like my glasses, if you're watching this on video, my glasses are physically real. They exist in the tangible material world. But the concept of I was say an eye exam, but that doesn't necessarily work. The concept of thinking about the quality of my sight, or thinking about any idea, that's a construct. You're inventing it in your mind. And we use our language to communicate to one another these ideas that we've formed. So something like Friday night is a construct that, like, oh, what do you think of when you think about Friday night? You think about going out with your friends or catching a movie, having a date. But the idea that it's Friday night, the week in itself is a construct, and going out at night is a construct, because they're all social expectations. They're all these ideas that someone invented, someone created. Not they invented like an invention like glasses, but they invented the concept of. And so when we communicate with these ideas, these constructs, it's like a shorthand. So I don't say to you, well, it's the 5th consecutive day that I've worked, and now I have 2 days off. So tonight, this evening, after work ends, I am going to engage in things that feel fun and indulgent as a way to demarcate the end of the workday. Now I go, it's Friday night. But if you've got that construct in your mind, and then you're struggling to adapt to this new reality that we're all in, this reality where the rules change every 12, 24, 36, 48 hours. And then you have to figure out what the new rules are. These old constructs that we're still stuck to are no longer by the same rules. But if we look at what the construct is, then we can try to satisfy the desire that we're feeling. So in the construct of a Friday night, it's the setting down of your concerns, it's sharing social space, it's having fun, it's typically doing something indulgent, right? Like having a beer, a glass of wine, maybe more than 2 or 3, maybe meeting somebody. It's the excitement of being out with people. So how can you take those elements, whatever they are for you, because that wasn't my Friday night. My Friday night was like home on my couch with a man person, enjoying something on television and being close with someone important to me. So if that's my normal Friday night, well, then I know that it means intimacy, it means calm, it means connection, it means entertainment. So how can I get those things? Even though, man person's not here, like all this other check boxes aren't checked, but I can still create the recipe just with slightly different ingredients. So we kind of, she and I talked about how she had already successfully reframed. But as we're coming into Saturday night, and then we're going to come back into Monday morning, each of us at a different moment are going to run up on constructs that for us were important, and maybe we didn't even realize they were important to us until we got to them. But when you come up on it, at least for us both, it was giving us a sad. And so understanding how to reframe when we realize that that's what's happening can give you a useful set of tools to move through those moments successfully. Because look, despair doesn't help anything. Despair isn't going to get us through this. Looking forward, having the skills in place for yourself so that when the moment comes, you know how to move through it successfully. And that's a lot of what I'm going to be trying to bring to you as my audience through the coming weeks, is tools and skills, abilities that will help you move through this. Because ultimately on the other side of this, I want all of us to be better than fine. It wasn't the, I'm going to go down a rabbit hole here for a second, but when I conceived of this show, that was not the original intent of that title. It was to spark you to be inspired, to live life above zero. But now it's, how do we move through this difficult thing so that on the other side, we have examined it, we've looked at it together, and we find ourselves more than okay through something difficult. And I think we can. So let's talk about reframing some constructs. Let's talk about moving through these ideas. So maybe these are all examples of things that clients have shared with me that we have been able to successfully reframe over the last week. So I've got one client that she's calling it her commute, that it used to be that home time in the morning was about coziness and moving into the day, and then she had a commute, and then she was on. And then she had a commute, and then she was off. And now she feels like she's not living with an on-off switch. So made sure to set up her working space in a separate space than where she currently is for her sleeping, eating, social time, so that those activities were happening in different zones. No more working on the bed, no more working on the couch, separate space. And her commute, soft quotes commute, is reframed as once she's up and she's had her cozy moment, she changes her clothes, and then she moves into her on space until a set time that she's done, transitions through her off space, changes into comfy clothes, and then has cozy time again. So what was your pattern that worked for you in the past? What were the elements of that pattern? And how can you flip the switch for yourself so that you can move through all of this successfully? Another client, it was working hours. Now that she's working from home, she's always on. From the moment she wakes up, she looks at her phone, she's doing, and she's basically doing until she falls asleep, because there is no separate space. And she feels a social obligation with her team because they're feeling pressure that she needs to be performing for them. as long as she's awake, and sometimes in the middle of the night. And so what she and I talked about was the concept of working hours. That there are hours she can communicate very clearly to her team that in a non-emergency, she'll be consistently available. That if they need her, she can be made available. But that just like you would have hours that you were in the office, that they respect one another's off switch time and have working hours. And then another really interesting one that's come up is this concept of leisure time. That we used to have time that was set aside in our week to do our fun stuff. But now as we're rolling through a day, that we're not demarcating time for this is when we do our leisure activity. And it's basically the opposite of the working hour switch. So what are you going to do to fill your off time that can refuel the tank? That can help you feel charged so that when it's your turn to serve, when it's your turn to support somebody, when it's your turn to give, you're ready. Because if you're like me, regardless of what I do for my work, people who love me need me right now. People who I care about are calling and writing and reaching out because they all have moments of struggle. We all have hit the wall at some point in the last week. And I hope for you, you've had people to turn to. I've also had people to turn to, people who love me, that were there for me when I needed them to be. And then it will be my turn at some point. So how can you set aside time, build time for yourself to fuel the tank, to do the things that feel good in your heart and your soul, in your physical body? True leisure time in the way we used to mean it. So what other constructs as I've talked through this have come to mind? No doubt you've got things that are unique to you and your situation. And I would love to hear about them. So feel free to reach out. Darlene@darlene.coach is my email. You can also hit me up on Instagram. I'm going to have an Instagram post specifically about this episode about constructs. So please feel free to hit up the comments. I also want to invite an Instagram initiative on your social media channels. Every morning, I'm inviting everyone to set a commitment. These are the behaviors that I'm going to do to get me out of bed every morning. So for me, I wake up, I meditate, I drink water, I have some coffee, then I get dressed. Because if I don't meditate, hydrate, caffeinate, I will just lay in bed and look at the news, just like everyone else. So instead of languishing there in that moment, instead of creating a moment where I will get stuck, because despair is not helpful, I'm getting up and I'm doing my 3 checkbox items, and then I'm taking a selfie and I'm posting it to my Instagram stories with the hashtag up and at 'em, up and at EM, up and at 'em. So I want to invite you, if you're hearing my voice, what are you going to do to get yourself up and at 'em first thing in the morning? Do those things, take a selfie, post it up, tag me at darlene.coach. Because I want to start a tidal wave of us all getting up together, continuing to move through this, and creating this intentional set of choices that keeps us all moving through this together.